and on behalf of Bankers Online and my new best friend, Jerry Panaro, welcome to today's program and presentation. And my name is Dana Turner. I will be one of your two guides today during this presentation. If you are the security manager or security officer, if you use that term, or the HR manager, you may have discovered that you have more opportunities to step in organizational mud pies than any other employees. And with all the current contacts and people involved and locations involved and weapons involved that we are experiencing in this country more and more, Jerry and I were talking about this before the program today, it's like almost every other day we're finding more and more workplace violence issues that are surfacing that are not only causing horrific problems for individuals, but also for their employers. So Jerry has put together a program of legal work on workplace violence, and he asked me to accompany him on this for some of the more practical things involving security. So if we can, without any other hoo-for-ah, I'm moving over to your slide number 2, and I have a separate copy of today's presentation on another computer here in case one of them goes down. We will have, as Andy said, a couple of Q&A breaks, and I put together a premise today. So in order to anchor this presentation here for you, the premise is that both employers and employees both believe that and it is referred to in the next two slides, is an act of workplace violence that will never happen to them. In my work as a law enforcement officer and my job as a security consultant and trainer since then, I have found that most people do not believe that it will ever happen to them. Having been involved in a lot of its in my career, I know that this stuff can happen to anybody, any place, any time. And that's my second bullet point. So when we talk about it today, it can happen to any workplace, anybody, and any time. And the third bullet point is it is not a matter of if things will happen, but a matter of when they're going to happen. So we're going to talk about some strategy and tactics in addition to the legal issues that Jerry's going to bring up for you today. And we put together basically a top 10 list of the most common things that Jerry has seen in his work within human resources and employment law, and that I've seen within mine within law enforcement and security consulting. Most employers and employees are simply not prepared to handle the during and the after phases of the act effectively. And that's pretty simple, because if you don't believe things like this can happen to you, then you never lay out a plan for how to deal with these things. So we're going to give you some specific plans to be able to work with today. If any of you have ever witnessed the FBI Safe Catch program, robbery suppression and apprehension program, one of its most clever phrases is that bank robbery is not the cost of doing business, it is the cost of doing nothing. Well, I adapted that to this presentation today because I think that terminology is so clear. So the workplace violence, is not the cost of doing business, it is the cost of doing nothing. And we'd like to prevent these kinds of things from happening in the first place. But if we can't prevent them, we want to be able to at least address them appropriately and do the cleanup work well afterwards. Workplace violence, or it, is personal. Each person involved will experience this act and its aftermath differently. Those folks who were in the movie theater in Aurora, Colorado, a city of a population 335,000, all those people, more than 300 of them, I understand, that were in that theater, didn't believe things like that could happen to them. And even in my experience, I didn't believe anything like that would happen to me. My wife and I go to the movie theaters all the time. Never considered that as an option. So it's personal, and everybody who was in that theater experienced it differently. And it's going to affect every employee in every function if it happens in your workplace, as well as their families. Now, the fallout from an act of workplace violence is likely to affect your entire workforce from anywhere to 6 to 36 months. And it's going to happen in waves, kind of like a pandemic event. Some people will be affected on Monday. Some people will be affected on Tuesday. The ones that were affected on Monday will not be affected on Tuesday. And it will roll through your organization like a wave. So if you're the security manager, one of your most valuable attributes is the ability to figure out what's going to happen next. Your ability as a human resource manager is upon taking care of the good of each person who happens to be within your organization, but you have probably more highly refined social and developmental skills than most other people within your organization. There's hope. There is something that that you can do about it, about any act of workplace violence. And we're not concentrating on movie theaters today. We have a variety of other things. In my experience as a law enforcement officer, and this would be my 41st year if I were still there, I've learned a lot about people, and I've learned a lot about events and certain triggering events that will precipitate certain acts of violence. But you know, every victim I ever talked to, the thousands of them, they all said that most acts of violence started with a simple assault. So the likelihood of becoming a victim of an act of workplace violence is present on your slide in common crimes involving a simple assault. Somebody bumps you with an elbow, stares you down hard, pushes on your chest to get you out of the way on a sidewalk. A simple assault is not necessarily painful, but it certainly is demeaning. Sexual assaults happen in the workplace also. It's just that not everybody talks about those kinds of things. So sexual assault's hallmark is that it's not about sex. It's actually a hate crime. And sexual assault has to do with dominion and control and power and humiliation and degradation. So it's a different thing than sex. Burglaries. You interrupt a burglary in progress at your bank, your credit union, or whoever you work for that you're listening today. And, you know, the burglar didn't anticipate running into a live human. The burglar broke into the building when nobody was there because he or she wanted to steal something without a witness. If it's a robbery, that's taking something by means of force or fear from your person. Usually involves either a threat or an act of violence. An extortion is kidnapping someone that you care about and holding that person for ransom in exchange for the return of the person. Relationship crimes can be anything that have to do with not only sexual assault, but primarily domestic violence. We talk about that today, too. Terrorist acts, I would consider the act in Aurora, Colorado as a terrorist act. It certainly wasn't the random one. So you have a terrorist act where there is a plan that goes along with that. You have a random act. Don't stand on a street corner next to 4 gang members flying colors and wait for the light to change, because you know those gang members attract bullets like magnets. So that might be a random act, and somebody who was nearby also became collateral damage. So if I were in your position and putting together a training program in my organization, I would look for a training program that dealt with the not just policies and procedures, but strategies that you can address as an employer to deal with these 8 different kinds of issues. Finishing up on today's premise, we're going to move over to issue number 1, and I'm going to introduce you to Jerry Panaro. The issue number 1 that we've selected for presentation today is, does my institution have to develop and administer a workplace safety program? And because this is what Jerry does for a living, Jerry, I'd like to turn this over to you, and if you give him a brief introduction on you and your background, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, thanks, Dana. My name is Jerry Panaro. I'm an attorney in Washington, D.C. I'm graduated from Georgetown Law Center. My specialty is nonprofit law and also human resources and employment law. I do a lot of training and writing and counseling, advising, investigating sexual harassment complaints and things of that sort, contracts, etc. So, and I've been in practice for about 35 years now. So that's basically my background. To answer the question that Dana poses, does the institution have to develop and administer a workplace safety program? The answer is this. Under the Occupational Safety and Health Act, you are responsible for providing a safe workplace for your employees. Now, exactly how you do that is up to you. So in a narrow sense, you may not have to develop a program, but under the OSHA standard, you are responsible for providing a safe workplace. The so-called general duty clause, employers are required to provide a place of employment that is free from recognizable, and this is going to be a theme that's running through this presentation, recognizable, foreseeable, advance notice, etc. So there's, under the general duty clause, the employer has the duty to provide the employees with a workplace free of recognizable hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious harm. Again, how the mechanics of how you do that is pretty much up to you, but that is the standard. And by the way, in the course of this presentation, we're going to be going into a lot of depth and detail on legalities and other issues. So to put this whole thing in context, and in case anybody has to leave early, I would just suggest 3 general propositions. First of all, as you'll learn from this presentation, there is no law, there's no law that prevents you from dealing swiftly and decisively with workplace violence. So there should never be any hesitancy on that point. Is this legal, et cetera, et cetera. There's no law to prevent you from addressing and dealing with workplace violence.